The Bird of the Difficult Eye by Lord Dunsany. Observant men and women that know their Bond Street will appreciate my astonishment when, in a jeweler's shop, perceived that nobody was furtively watching me. Not only this, but when I even picked up a little carved crystal to examine it, no shop assistants crowded round me. I walked the whole length of the shop. Still no one politely followed. Seeing from this that some extraordinary revolution had occurred in the jewelry business, I went with my curiosity well aroused to a queer old person, half demon and half man, who has an idol shop in a byway of the city and who keeps me informed of affairs of the edge of the world. And briefly, over a pinch of heather incense that he takes by way of snuff, he gave me this tremendous information, that Mr. Neepy Thang, the son of Thangobrind, had returned from the edge of the world and was even now in London. The information may not appear tremendous to those unacquainted with the source of jewelry, but when I say that the only thief employed by any West End jeweler since famous Thangobrind's distressing doom is this same Neepy Thang, and that for lightness of fingers and swiftness of stockinged foot they have none better in Paris, it will be understood why the Bond Street jewelers no longer cared what became of their old stock. There were big diamonds in London that summer, and a few considerable sapphires. In certain astounding kingdoms behind the East, strange sovereigns missed from their turbans the heirlooms of ancient wars, and here and there the keepers of crown jewels who had not heard the stockinged feet of Thang were questioned and died slowly. And the jewelers gave a little dinner to Thang at the Hotel Great Magnificent. The windows had not been opened for 5 years, and there was wine at a guinea a bottle that you could not tell from champagne, and cigars at half a crown with a Havana label. Altogether, it was a splendid evening for Thang. But I have to tell of a far sadder thing than a dinner at a hotel. The public required jewelry, and jewelry must be obtained. I have to tell of Neepy Thang's last journey. That year, the fashion was emeralds. A man named Green had recently crossed the channel on a bicycle, and the jewelers said that a green stone would be particularly appropriate to commemorate the event and recommended emeralds. Now, a certain moneylender of Cheapside, who had just been made a peer, had divided his gains into 3 equal parts, one for the purchase of the peerage, country house, and park, and the 20,000 pheasants that are absolutely essential, and one for the upkeep of the position, while a third he banked abroad, partly to cheat the native tax-gatherer, and partly because it seemed to him that the days of the peerage were few, and that he might at any moment be called upon to start afresh elsewhere. In the upkeep of the position he included jewelry for his wife, and so it came about that Lord Castlenorman placed in order with 2 well-known Bond Street jewelers, named Messrs. Grosvenor and Campbell, to the extent of £100,000 for a few reliable emeralds. But the emeralds in stock were mostly small and shop-soiled, and Neepy Thang had to set out at once before he had had as much as a week in London. I will briefly sketch his project. Not many knew it, for where the form of business is blackmail, the fewer creditors you have, the better, which of course in various degrees applies at all times. On the shores of the risky seas of Shirora Shan grows one tree only, so that upon its branches, if anywhere in the world, there must build its nests the bird of the difficult eye. Neepy Thang had come by this information, which was indeed the truth, that if the bird migrated to fairyland before the 3 eggs hatched out, they would undoubtedly all turn into emeralds, while if they hatched out first, it would be a bad business. When he mentioned these eggs to Messrs. Grosvenor and Campbell, they had said the very thing. They were men of few words in English, for it was not their native tongue. So Neepy Thang set out. He bought the purple ticket at Victoria Station. He went by Heron Hill, Bromley, and Bickley, and past St. Mary Cray. At Eynsford he changed, and, taking a footpath along a winding valley, went wandering into the hills. And at the top of a hill, in a little wood, where all the anemones long since were over, and the perfume of mint and thyme from outside came drifting in with Thang, he found once more the familiar path, age-old and fair as wonder, that leads to the edge of the world. Little to him were its sacred memories that are one with the secret of earth, for he was out on business, and little would they be to me if I ever put them on paper. Let it suffice that he went down that path, going further and further from the fields we know, and all the way he muttered to himself, "What if the eggs hatch out, and it be a bad business?" The glamour that is at all times upon those lonely lands that lie at the back of the chalky hills of Kent intensified as he went upon his journeys. Queerer and queerer grew the things that he saw by the little world-end path. Many a twilight descended upon that journey with all their mysteries. Many a blaze of stars, many a morning came flaming up to a tinkle of silvern horns, till the outpost elves of Fairyland came in sight, and the glittering crests of Fairyland's 3 mountains betokened the journey's end. And so, with painful steps, for the shores of the world are covered with huge crystals, he came to the risky seas of Shirora Shan, and saw them pounding to gravel the wreckage of fallen stars, saw them and heard their roar, those shipless seas that between earth and the fairies' homes heave beneath some huge wind that is none of our four. And there in the darkness on the grisly coast, for darkness was swooping slantwise down the sky as though with some evil purpose, there stood that lonely, gnarled, and deciduous tree. It was a bad place to be found in after dark, and night descended with multitudes of stars. Beasts prowling in the blackness gluttered at Neepy Thang. And there on a lower branch, within easy reach, he clearly saw the bird of the difficult eye, sitting upon the nest for which she is famous. Her face was towards those 3 inscrutable mountains, far off on the other side of the risky seas, whose hidden valleys are Fairyland. Though not yet autumn in the fields we know, it was close on midwinter here, the moment, as Thang knew well, when those eggs hatch out. Had he miscalculated and arrived a minute too late? Yet the bird was even now about to migrate. Her pinions fluttered, and her gaze was toward Fairyland. Thang hoped and muttered a prayer to those pagan gods whose spite and vengeance he had most reason to fear. It seems that it was too late, or a prayer too small to placate them, for there and then the stroke of midwinter came, and the eggs hatched out in the roar of Shirora Shan, or ever the bird was gone with her difficult eye, and it was a bad business indeed for Neepy Thang. I haven't the heart to tell you any more. "Here," said Lord Castlenorman some few weeks later to Messrs. Grosvenor and Campbell, "you aren't half taking your time about those emeralds."